there existed a particular cruelty in being rendered invisible through systematic reduction of worth rather than circumstance, methodical elimination of recognition that operated beyond simple social neglect to encompass deliberate cultivation of insignificance within hierarchies that governed pack dynamics through established assessment of value and legitimate acknowledgement of individual contribution to community welfare and territorial stability. For Ilara Voss, invisibility had been perfected through years of careful navigation that maintained omega appearance while concealing truth about heritage, that possessed significance far beyond anything her current circumstances might suggest to observers whose understanding of power operated according to conventional parameters that failed to account for variables hidden through ancestral supri, scion of dangerous bloodline connections. 24 years old and carrying presence that commanded dismissal rather than attention, she had learned to serve within establishments that catered to royal elite, whose entertainment often included systematic humiliation of staff members whose omega status rendered them acceptable targets for demonstration of authority through casual cruelty disguised as harmless amusement. The Gilded Moon Tavern represented neutral territory where pack politics intersected with social hierarchy, through environment that honored wealth over wisdom, while providing venue for displays of status that operated beyond simple privilege, to encompass systematic assertion of dominance over individuals whose circumstances rendered them vulnerable to public degradation without consequence. Her employment within establishment that served royal family and associated nobility represented necessity rather than choice. Economic pressure that had eliminated alternatives while providing foundation for survival that required endurance of treatment, that challenged personal dignity through casual reduction to entertainment value for patrons, whose amusement depended on demonstration of superiority. The Voss lineage possessed connections to lunar magic that had been systematically eliminated during territorial consolidation, that prioritized conventional strength over mystical capability, while their survival had required complete concealment of heritage through methods that reduced apparent significance to levels that attracted no investigation from authorities whose suspicion might prove catastrophic. Ancient bloodlines that traced connection to primordial pack formation possessed significance that transcended normal assessment, while serving recognition that certain families had shaped territorial development through magical contribution that operated beyond conventional authority to encompass supernatural guidance that had been honored before. Political necessity eliminated acknowledgement of huge capability. Her daily existence within tavern environment required navigation of social dynamics that honored cruelty over compassion, while serving patrons whose entertainment often included systematic degradation of staff members, whose omega status provided convenient target for demonstration of authority that operated beyond appropriate behavior to encompass calculated humiliation, disguised as social interaction. Prince Cale Thorne represented epitome of privileged authority, whose understanding of power operated through domination rather than service, heir to Lycan throne, whose character had been shaped by systematic reinforcement of superiority through environment that eliminated challenge while providing constant validation of worth, that transcended any requirement for demonstration of actual capability or wisdom. His frequent presence within tavern served entertainment purposes that honored systematic cruelty over meaningful social interaction, while providing venue for displays of authority that operated beyond simple privilege to encompass calculated degradation of individuals whose circumstances rendered them vulnerable to public humiliation, without consequence or acknowledgement of inappropriate behavior. The entertainment value that he derived from her systematic humiliation represented pattern that had developed through years of unchallenged authority, while serving demonstration of power that operated beyond appropriate interaction to encompass deliberate cultivation of suffering, that honored cruel amusement over basic human dignity or recognition of individual worth. Tonight would witness convergence of circumstances that tested whether protective concealment could withstand direct provocation that exceeded normal parameters for endurance, while systematic humiliation would encounter resistance that operated beyond conventional omega limitation to encompass ancestral connection to power that had been suppressed rather than eliminated through historical necessity. Ancient magic that responded to emotional extremity possessed capability for awakening dormant potential when circumstances created triggers that exceeded protective barriers, while sustained cruelty might prove sufficient catalyst for revelation that challenged comfortable assumptions about eliminated bloodlines and appropriate power distribution within established hierarchy. The evening that would transform systematic humiliation into moment of recognition would test whether decades of careful concealment could contain power that possessed significance beyond anything normal assessment might suggest, while calculated cruelty would encounter resistance that honored ancestral heritage over performed submission to authority that demanded acknowledgement through systematic. See degradation. In recognition that single moment of provocation might determine whether protective suppression had preserved safety or merely delayed inevitable discovery, forces would converge according to principles that honored authentic capability over demonstrated weakness, while testing whether systematic cruelty could continue without consequence when directed toward individual whose heritage commanded cognition rather than dismissal. Some insults awakened responses that exceeded their intended impact to serve revelation of power that had been carefully concealed, while some entertainment that operated through systematic cruelty might prove inadequate when confronted by authority that transcended conventional limitation through ancestral connection to forces that demanded acknowledgement rather than continued suppression. The Omega, who had learned to endure systematic humiliation, was about to discover whether ancestral protection exceeded personal endurance, while the prince whose authority had never faced meaningful challenge would encounter resistance that operated beyond conventional parameters to encompass power that commanded recognition rather than casual dismissal through entertaining cruelty. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The Gilded Moon Tavern possessed atmosphere designed to honor wealth over wisdom through systematic display of luxury that served patrons whose status required constant validation, establishment where crystal chandeliers cast light that softened harsh expressions while providing environment for social interaction, that operated according to hierarchies demanding recognition of superiority through appropriate acknowledgement of individual worth and territorial significance. Polished marble floors reflected amber illumination, while ornate furnishing created spaces for private conversation alongside public demonstration of authority, venue that attracted royal elite whose entertainment often included systematic assertion of dominance over staff members whose Omega status rendered them convenient targets for displays of power that operated beyond appropriate behavior. Ilara moved through crowded dining area with practiced efficiency that honored professional responsibility, while maintaining careful distance from patrons whose amusement frequently involved deliberate provocation, designed to create opportunities for public humiliation that served entertainment value rather than meaningful social interaction or recognition of individual dignity. Her uniform of simple black dress and white apron marked her status within establishment hierarchy, while providing foundation for professional appearance that honored service requirements, despite systematic reduction of personal worth to functional utility within environment that prioritized patron convenience over staff welfare or basic human decency. Table 17 requires attention, observed tavern manager Harrison Graywald with tone that carried administrative authority while maintaining professional detachment that reduced staff members to functional resources rather than individuals whose welfare demanded consideration beyond simple operational efficiency and customer satisfaction requirements. The assignment represented routine service obligation, while serving reminder of position within hierarchy that honored patron authority over personal dignity, systematic arrangement that had developed through years of establishment policy that prioritized customer entertainment over appropriate treatment of employees whose circumstances rendered them vulnerable to systematic exploitation. Evening crowd included members of royal court whose presence commanded special attention while serving demonstration of establishment prestige that operated through association with territorial authority, recognition that attracted patrons whose entertainment value exceeded simple dining to encompass social interaction that honored status through systematic assertion of superiority. Prince Cale Thorne occupied central position within dining area that provided optimal visibility for demonstrations of authority, while serving strategic location for entertainment that honored systematic cruelty over meaningful conversation, his presence commanding attention through combination of inherited status and cultivated arrogance that had been reinforced through years of unchallenged price. Village. Around him, assembled courtiers provided audience for displays of dominance that operated beyond simple conversation to encompass calculated provocation of staff members whose omega status rendered them acceptable targets for public degradation that served amusement value without consequence, or acknowledgement of inappropriate behavior that challenged basic human decency. Service standards continue to decline, Prince Kale announced with tone designed to carry throughout dining area, while serving systematic humiliation disguised as legitimate criticism, particularly regarding staff whose competence challenges patron confidence in establishment quality and appropriate recognition of customer authority. The public criticism represented pattern that had developed through years of systematic targeting that honored cruel entertainment over professional assessment, while serving demonstration of power that operated beyond reasonable evaluation to encompass deliberate cultivation of humiliation that provided amusement value for assembled audience. Alara approached table with composure that transcended circumstances while maintaining professional dignity, despite recognition that encounter would likely include systematic degradation designed to provide entertainment value rather than legitimate service interaction or acknowledgement of individual worth, beyond functional utility within establishment operations. "Your order," she requested with tone that honored professional responsibility, while avoiding provocation that might escalate systematic cruelty into more direct confrontation. Recognition that her circumstances required careful navigation of authority that operated beyond appropriate behavior to encompass calculated malice disguised as social interaction. "Competence question," Prince Kale replied with smile that revealed anticipation of entertainment rather than genuine service requirement, while his attention focused on opportunity for public demonstration of authority that would serve cruel amusement over meaningful interaction. Concerns whether Omega staff possess capability for understanding complex requests. The deliberate provocation represented escalation beyond normal systematic harassment, while serving calculated attempt to create circumstances that would justify public humiliation through demonstration of supposed inadequacy that honored prejudice over professional assessment or recognition of individual capability beyond predetermined limitation. "Perhaps," he continued with tone that attracted attention from surrounding tables while serving systematic orchestration of public spectacle that honored cruel entertainment over basic human dignity. "Intellectual limitation prevents comprehension of service requirements that exceed simple mechanical repetition of memorized procedures." Around dining area, conversations diminished as patrons processed developing entertainment that honored systematic cruelty over appropriate social interaction, while providing demonstration of authority that operated beyond reasonable behavior to encompass calculated degradation that served amusement value for assembled audience, whose approval validated inappropriate conduct. "I understand your requirements perfectly," Alara replied with careful control that maintained professional dignity while serving recognition that escalation beyond normal harassment required response that honored personal worth over systematic submission to authority, that demanded acknowledgement through public humiliation and degradation of individual value. The response carried implications that extended beyond simple service interaction to encompass assertion of individual worth that challenged systematic reduction to entertainment value, recognition that circumstances had exceeded normal parameters for endurance while requiring acknowledgement that transcended conventional omega limitation through demonstration of personal dignity. "Understanding," Prince Kale observed with expression that mixed amusement with growing recognition of resistance that challenged comfortable assumptions about appropriate submission to royal authority and legitimate acknowledgement of superiority through systematic degradation, requires intellectual capacity that exceeds normal omega limitation. The systematic escalation revealed calculation designed to provoke response that would justify increased humiliation while serving entertainment value that honored cruel amusement over recognition of individual worth, demonstration of authority that operated beyond appropriate behavior to encompass deliberate cultivation of circumstances that would provide foundation for public spectacle. "Your assumption about intellectual capacity," Alara replied with tone that carried warning despite professional requirement for courtesy, while serving recognition that systematic harassment had exceeded tolerable parameters, reveals more about your limitations than mine regarding appropriate assessment of individual capability and recognition of worth that transcends inherited privilege. The response challenged comfortable assumptions about omega submission, while serving assertion of dignity that operated beyond conventional limitation, acknowledgement that systematic cruelty had created circumstances requiring resistance rather than continued endurance of treatment that challenged basic human decency and appropriate recognition of individual worth. A round table where confrontation developed beyond normal parameters for staff interaction. Assembled courtiers processed exchange with expressions that revealed mixture of shock and anticipation regarding unprecedented challenge to royal authority that had never encountered meaningful resistance from individuals whose circumstances rendered them vulnerable to systematic exploitation. Intellectual assessment, Prince Kale announced, with voice that carried throughout dining area while serving systematic orchestration of public spectacle that honored cruel entertainment over appropriate social interaction, suggests that Omega staff require instruction about appropriate acknowledgement of royal authority and legitimate recognition of status that transcends service obligation. The public declaration represented escalation beyond normal harassment, while serving calculated attempt to create circumstances that would justify systematic humiliation through demonstration of supposed inadequacy, disguised as legitimate correction of inappropriate behavior that challenged established hierarchy and appropriate submission to inherited privilege. Perhaps, he continued with systematic cultivation of cruel entertainment that honored malice over basic human decency, while providing foundation for public degradation that would serve amusement value. Physical demonstration would provide educational value about appropriate recognition of authority and legitimate acknowledgement of superior status. The threat carried implications that extended beyond verbal harassment to encompass potential physical confrontation that would serve entertainment value while providing opportunity for demonstration of dominance that operated beyond appropriate behavior to encompass calculated abuse, disguised as correction of inappropriate resistance to legitimate authority. In recognition that systematic harassment had exceeded parameters for professional endurance, while creating circumstances that demanded response beyond conventional Omega submission, moment had arrived when protective concealment would be tested against provocation that challenged fundamental assumptions about appropriate treatment and legitimate acknowledgement of individual worth that transcend de-inherited status. The tavern that had witnessed countless demonstrations of authority through systematic degradation was about to accommodate confrontation that challenged comfortable assumptions about power distribution, while entertainment that had operated through casual cruelty would encounter resistance that honored ancestral heritage over performed submission to authority that demanded recognition through systematic humiliation. Ancient forces that had been suppressed through protective necessity were about to respond to emotional extremity that exceeded normal parameters for endurance, while systematic cruelty would discover whether calculated provocation could continue without consequence when directed toward individual whose bloodline commanded acknowledgement rather than casual dismissal through entertaining degradati. The moment when systematic harassment exceeded tolerable parameters, possessed characteristics that transcended simple confrontation, to encompass awakening of forces that had been deliberately suppressed through generations of protective concealment, while emotional extremity created circumstances that challenged ancient barriers designed to prevent exactly such revelation of power that operated beyond conventional limitation. Ilara felt pressure building within her consciousness that operated beyond normal stress response to encompass recognition of ancestral connection that had remained dormant through years of careful suppression, awareness that systematic cruelty had created catalysts sufficient for awakening potential that possessed significance, far exceeding anything her current circumstances might suggest to Obses. Arvers whose assessment honored surface evaluation. The sensation began as warmth that spread through her awareness while serving recognition that individual endurance had reached limitation that demanded response beyond conventional Omega submission, acknowledgement that circumstances required assertion of worth that transcended systematic reduction to entertainment value through cruel amusement that honored malice over basic human dignity. Educational demonstration. Prince Kale continued with systematic orchestration of public spectacle that served cruel entertainment while providing foundation for physical confrontation, disguised as legitimate correction of inappropriate resistance to royal authority and appropriate acknowledgement of inherited superiority through demonstrated dominance, will address misconceptions about appropriate I8 behavior. His movement toward her carried implications that extended beyond verbal harassment, to encompass potential assault that would serve entertainment value, while providing opportunity for demonstration of power that operated beyond appropriate conduct to encompass calculated abuse that honored systematic cruelty over recognition of individual worth or basic human decency. Around dining area where confrontation developed beyond normal parameters for social interaction, assembled patrons processed escalating situation with expressions that revealed mixture of anticipation and discomfort regarding systematic harassment that had exceeded boundaries for appropriate behavior, while serving entertainment that challenged basic standards for human dignity and respectful treatment. The pressure within Alara's consciousness intensified as emotional extremity encountered ancestral protection that had been designed to respond when circumstances threatened individual survival through systematic abuse, ancient magic that operated beyond conscious control, while serving recognition that certain provocations demanded response that transcended conventional limitation through bloodly connection to power. Temperature within tavern shifted subtly as suppressed potential began awakening through catalytic effect of sustained humiliation that had exceeded protective barriers, environmental change that honored supernatural response, while serving demonstration that systematic cruelty had consequences that operated beyond normal assessment of appropriate behavior and legitimate acknowledgement of individual worth. The temperature, observed one patron with growing unease that reflected recognition of atmospheric changes that challenged normal environmental parameters while suggesting presence of forces that operated beyond conventional explanation, seems to be dropping despite adequate heating throughout establishment according to normal seasonal requirements. The systematic observation revealed evidence of supernatural influence that exceeded coincidence, while serving acknowledgement that individual emotional state had created circumstances affecting physical environment through methods that operated beyond normal capability. Demonstration that suppressed potential possessed significance, that challenged comfortable assumptions about eliminated bloodliness. Crystal chandeliers began resonating with frequency that exceeded normal vibration, while serving response to emotional extremity that had awakened dormant connection to lunar magic, environmental interaction that honored ancestral heritage, while providing evidence of capability that transcended conventional omega limitation through bloodline significance that demanded recognition rather than systematic dismissal. Curious atmospheric disturbance, noted tavern manager with professional concern that honored establishment responsibility while serving growing awareness that developing situation exceeded normal parameters for customer interaction and appropriate management of staff-patron relationships that maintained business operations according to established protocol, requiring investigation that address this unusual environmental phenomena. The systematic documentation of supernatural responses created pattern that challenged conventional assessment, while providing foundation for recognition that individual whose treatment had exceeded appropriate parameters possessed characteristics that operated beyond normal omega capability through suppressed potential that honored protective heritage alongside emotional resilience. Prince Kale processed environmental changes with expression that revealed mixture of confusion and growing awareness that systematic harassment had created circumstances beyond normal expectation, recognition that entertainment that operated through cruel amusement might have awakened responses that challenged comfortable assumptions about omega limitation and appropriate acknowledgement of royal authority. Interesting coincidence, he observed with tone that attempted to maintain confidence despite growing evidence of phenomena that exceeded normal explanation, while serving strategic calculation about appropriate response to circumstances that challenged systematic assumptions about power distribution and legitimate acknowledgement of individual worth through demonstrated dominance regarding environmental fluctuations. The atmospheric pressure continued building as emotional extremity encountered ancient protection that had been designed to respond when systematic abuse exceeded tolerable parameters, lunar connection that operated beyond conscious control, while serving recognition that certain bloodlines possessed significance that demanded acknowledgement, rather than casual dismissal through entertaining cruel. Shadows within tavern began moving, according to patterns that challenged normal illumination, while serving response to awakening potential that honored ancestral magic over conventional limitation, environmental manifestation that provided evidence of supernatural capability that transcended surface evaluation to encompass hereditary connection to forces that commanded recognition rather than systematic suppression. The shadows, whispered Courtier with growing alarm, that reflected recognition of phenomena that operated beyond normal explanation, while suggesting presence of power that challenged comfortable assumptions about appropriate entertainment and legitimate acknowledgement of individual worth through systematic degradation, appear to be moving independently of light sources. The systematic observation documented supernatural interaction that exceeded environmental coincidence, while serving acknowledgement that individual whose treatment had honored systematic cruelty possessed capability that operated beyond conventional assessment through bloodline connection to magical traditions that demanded recognition rather than continued concealment. Around dining area where confrontation had awakened forces that challenged normal parameters for social interaction, patrons began processing evidence of supernatural phenomena that honored ancestral protection, while serving demonstration that systematic harassment had consequences that exceeded normal expectation for entertaining cruelty, disguised as legitimate assertion of authority. Ancient wards that protected tavern establishment from magical intrusion demonstrated recognition of legitimate bloodline authority through environmental response that honored hereditary connection over conventional limitation, acknowledgement that individual whose presence had been systematically dismissed possessed characteristics that commanded supernatural recognition despite surface appearance. The protective barriers observed establishment's resident magical consultant with professional amazement that honored systematic evaluation of phenomena beyond normal capability, are responding as if recognizing legitimate authority that operates beyond current assessment of patron status, an appropriate acknowledgement of supernatural capability within territorial boundaries. The systematic verification of magical interaction provided evidence that challenged comfortable assumptions about eliminated bloodlines, while serving recognition that individual whose circumstances had rendered her vulnerable to systematic abuse possessed heritage that commanded acknowledgement through supernatural means that transcended conventional evaluation of omega worth and appropriate POW. Et distribution. Alara felt awareness expanding beyond normal parameters as ancestral connections strengthened through emotional catalyst that had exceeded protective barriers. Recognition that systematic cruelty had awakened potential that operated according to principles that honored bloodline significance over performed submission to authority, that demanded acknowledgement through systematic degradation and public. I see humiliation. You chose the wrong omega, she said with voice that carried authority transcending circumstances, while serving recognition that systematic harassment had exceeded tolerable parameters, words that honored ancestral heritage over conventional limitation, while providing foundation for acknowledgement that challenged comfortable assumptions about power distribution and appropriate treatment of individuals whose worth operated beyond surface evaluation. The declaration resonated through tavern atmosphere with force that exceeded normal speech, while serving demonstration that suppressed potential possessed significance beyond anything conventional assessment might suggest. Acknowledgement that individual whose treatment had honored systematic cruelty commanded recognition that transcended established hierarchy through bloodline connection to force. As that demanded acknowledgement. Around dining area where systematic harassment had awakened supernatural response that challenged normal parameters for social interaction, assembled patrons processed revelation that honored evidence over assumption, while serving growing recognition that entertainment that operated through cruel amusement had encountered resistance that exceeded conventional limitation through ancestral protectee. The pressure within atmosphere reached crescendo as ancient magic responded to emotional extremity through systematic awakening of potential that had been preserved rather than eliminated, demonstration that bloodline significance operated beyond comfortable assessment to encompass capability that commanded acknowledgement through supernatural means that transcended conventional authority. Crystal illumination flickered with patterns that honored lunar connection, while serving environmental response to awakening heritage that possessed significance far exceeding anything normal evaluation might suggest. Systematic manifestation of power that challenged established assumptions about eliminated bloodlines and appropriate recognition of individual worth through demonstrated capability. In recognition, that moment of systematic harassment had catalyzed revelation that would challenge fundamental assumptions about power distribution, while serving acknowledgement that authentic authority operated beyond inherited privilege to encompass bloodline connection to forces that demanded recognition rather than casual dismissal through entertaining cruelty. Transformation had begun that test whether comfortable hierarchies could withstand truth about eliminated bloodlines. The Omega, who had endured systematic humiliation, was about to discover whether ancestral protection provided foundation for resistance that exceeded conventional limitation, while the prince whose authority had operated through systematic cruelty would encounter challenge that honored bloodline significance over inherited privilege through demonstration of capability that commanded acknowledgement, rather than dismissal. The revelation that had emerged through systematic awakening of suppressed potential possessed implications that transcended individual confrontation to encompass fundamental challenge to territorial authority, whose legitimacy had been built upon assumption that certain bloodlines had been successfully eliminated through historical purges designed to prevent challenge to established order through unauthorized magical capability that threatened conventional power distribution. The atmosphere within Gilded Moon Tavern transformed as ancient magic responded to emotional catalyst that had exceeded protective barriers, environmental manifestation that honored bloodline significance, while serving demonstration that systematic cruelty had consequences beyond normal expectation for entertaining harassment, disguised as legitimate assertion of royal authority and appropriate acknowledgement of inherited superiority. Prince Kale found himself confronting evidence that challenged comfortable assumptions about power distribution, while serving recognition that entertainment that operated through systematic degradation had awakened forces that exceeded conventional assessment of omega limitation and appropriate acknowledgement of individual worth through demonstrated capability rather than inherited privilege that demanded submission through systematic humiliation. The Voss lineage, he whispered, with growing recognition that systematic harassment had revealed connection to bloodlines that had been officially eliminated, while serving acknowledgement that individual whose treatment had honored cruel amusement possessed heritage that commanded supernatural recognition, despite decades of protective concealment, was supposed to have been completely eradicated during the lunar purges. The historical reference carried implications that extended beyond simple genealogical curiosity to encompass systematic understanding of political forces that had shaped territorial development through elimination of bloodlines that possessed connection to primordial pack formation and magical traditions that had guided early territorial establishment before political necessity eliminated acknowledgement of such capability. Around dining area, where confrontation had awakened supernatural response beyond normal parameters for social interaction, assembled patrons processed revelation with expressions that revealed mixture of shock and growing awareness that comfortable assumptions about eliminated bloodlines had failed to account for survivors whose heritage commanded recognition through demonstrated capability. Alara felt ancestral awareness expanding through consciousness that had been systematically suppressed while serving recognition that emotional extremity had created catalysts sufficient for awakening potential that operated according to principles that honored bloodline significance over conventional limitation, connection to lunar magic that transcended current circumstances through hereditary authority. The transformation that manifested through systematic dissolution of protective concealment revealed characteristics that exceeded anything normal omega assessment might suggest, while serving acknowledgement that authentic capability operated beyond surface evaluation to encompass hereditary connection to forces that demanded recognition rather than casual dismissal through entertaining cruelty. Her scent shifted to encompass undertones that suggested noble bloodline rather than common heritage, biological markers that honored legitimate authority while providing evidence of suppressed potential that had been preserved through protective measures designed to prevent detection by conventional investigation methods that operated according to normal parameters for identifying supernatural capability. Alpha heritage, observed one courtier, with tone that mixed professional assessment with growing recognition of acquisition that exceeded any calculation based on established hierarchy, systematic evaluation that revealed individual whose presence represented connection to bloodlines that possessed significance far beyond anything surface assessment might suggest through traditional evaluation of territorial authority. The revelation carried implications that extended beyond simple heritage recognition to encompass fundamental questions about territorial legitimacy and appropriate acknowledgement of bloodlines that possessed connection to primordial authority through magical traditions that had shaped early pack development. Before political consolidation, eliminated recognition of such capability through systemate. Icy purges. Physical transformation continued as protective suppression encountered emotional catalyst that possessed capability for recognizing authentic potential while serving systematic revelation that honored hereditary connection over performed inadequacy, characteristics that commanded attention through demonstration rather than concealment, that had preserved safety through strategic reduction of APA. Wentworth. Her posture straightened to reflect confidence that transcended circumstances while maintaining dignity, that honored individual worth beyond systematic reduction to entertainment value. Presence that commanded recognition through authentic authority, rather than demonstrated weakness that had served protective purposes through careful management of social interaction and strategic concealment. The lunar blessing. Prince Kale continued with systematic presentation of knowledge that revealed comprehensive understanding, despite official elimination of associated documentation, was considered the most dangerous of hereditary gifts, because it operated independently of pack authority, while serving individual connection to primordial forces that shaped territorial development. The explanation provided context that transcended simple heritage recognition to encompass systematic understanding of magical capability that had been eliminated through political necessity rather than actual threat assessment. Acknowledgement that certain bloodlines had been targeted for elimination because they possessed independence that challenged systematic control rather than inherent dung. Your survival, he noted with recognition, that honored strategic thinking, despite growing awareness of implications that extended beyond individual discovery, represents preservation of capability that was supposed to have been completely eradicated through systematic elimination that ensured no survivors could challenge territorial authority through unauthorized magical connection. The systematic evaluation revealed understanding that transcended simple acknowledgement to encompass calculation about implications of heritage revelation for territorial stability and appropriate response to discovery that challenged fundamental assumptions about successful bloodline elimination and appropriate distribution of magical authority within established hierarchy. Around Tavern, where revelation had transformed systematic harassment into moment of recognition, environmental responses continued manifesting through atmospheric changes that honored supernatural awakening, while serving demonstration that suppressed potential possessed significance that exceeded normal assessment of individual capability and appropriate acknowledgement of hereditary worth. Ancient protection that had operated through careful concealment was being replaced by demonstration of authentic capability, as emotional catalysts dissolved barriers that had been designed to preserve safety through systematic suppression of characteristics that might attract investigation from authorities whose attention could prove catastrophic for individual survival and community welfare. The lunar connection that had been systematically suppressed began manifesting through environmental interaction that honored ancestral heritage, while serving recognition that certain bloodlines possessed significance that transcended conventional assessment through direct relationship to forces that had shaped territorial development during primordial pack formation. The question, Prince Kale announced with authority that struggled to maintain confidence despite growing evidence of phenomena that challenged comfortable assumptions about power distribution, concerns whether revelation serves challenge to established authority or represents opportunity for strategic integration that honors both heritage acknowledgement and territorial stability. The proposal revealed strategic thinking that transcended simple confrontation to encompass calculation about appropriate response to discovery that possessed implications for fundamental assumptions about legitimate authority and appropriate distribution of magical capability within established hierarchy that had been built upon elimination of competing bloodlines. Integration, Alara replied, with voice that carried authority transcending circumstances, while serving recognition that heritage revelation provided foundation for negotiation rather than continued concealment, requires acknowledgement of worth that operates beyond systematic reduction to entertainment value through cruel amusement that honors malice over recognition of individual dignity and legitimate contribution. The response established parameters for relationship that honored mutual recognition, while serving strategic objectives that transcended simple submission to inherited privilege through demonstration of capability that commanded acknowledgement rather than casual dismissal through systematic harassment disguised as social interaction. Around dining area, where confrontation had been transformed into negotiation that addressed fundamental questions about appropriate power distribution, assembled patrons processed developing situation with expressions that revealed recognition of historical significance regarding bloodline revelation that challenged comfortable assumptions about eliminated magical authority. The Lunar Council, Prince Kale observed with systematic presentation of political reality that honored strategic necessity while serving recognition of heritage significance, would require official acknowledgement of bloodline survival through formal recognition that addresses territorial authority, alongside individual capability that operates according to legitimate hereditary connection. The proposal acknowledged implications that extended beyond individual revelation, to encompass systematic integration of capability within established hierarchy, while serving recognition that heritage significance demanded official acknowledgement, rather than continued concealment that had preserved safety through protective suppression. In growing recognition that systematic harassment had catalyzed revelation that would require comprehensive response beyond simple individual acknowledgement, negotiation would address fundamental questions about appropriate integration of capability that honored both territorial stability and heritage recognition, while establishing precedent for bloodline acknowledgement that operated beyond Alimi. Nated assumption. The evening that had begun with systematic humiliation, designed to provide entertainment value, had been transformed into moment of recognition that challenged fundamental assumptions about power distribution, while serving acknowledgement that authentic authority operated beyond inherited privilege to encompass hereditary connection to forces that demanded recognition, rather than casual dismissal. Ancient magic that had been suppressed through protective necessity was about to serve territorial enhancement through official acknowledgement, rather than continued concealment, while establishment that had witnessed systematic degradation would accommodate transformation that honored recognition over entertainment through cruel amusement that challenged basic human dignity. Around tavern where systematic cruelty had awakened supernatural response beyond normal parameters for social interaction, atmosphere reflected transformation from entertainment venue into location where heritage revelation would establish foundation for relationship that honored mutual recognition rather than systematic submission to authority that demanded acknowledgement through degrading entertainment. The Omega, whose heritage had been systematically concealed, was about to discover whether official acknowledgement provided superior protection to careful suppression, while the Prince, whose authority had operated through systematic cruelty, would learn that authentic power required recognition rather than degradation, acknowledgement rather than elimination, that honored comprehensive assessment over comfortable assumption about appropriate bloodline distribution. Some entertainment that operated through systematic cruelty awakened responses that exceeded intended impact, while serving revelation of capability that commanded acknowledgement rather than casual dismissal, recognition that authentic authority operated beyond inherited privilege to encompass hereditary connection to forces that shaped territorial development through primordial guidance that demanded recognition rather than elimination. The confrontation that had begun with calculated harassment had been transformed into recognition that honored heritage significance, while serving strategic objectives that transcended simple dominance through systematic acknowledgement of capability that operated beyond conventional limitation to encompass bloodline connection to magical authority that commanded integration rather than continued suppression. 18 months later, the Royal Council Chamber possessed atmosphere that reflected transformation from traditional hierarchy based on inherited privilege to comprehensive governance structure where bloodline significance operated alongside demonstrated capability, environment where ancient wisdom complemented contemporary necessity through systematic integration of hereditary authority with established territorial management that honored recognition over elimination. Royal advisor Alara Voss occupied position at polished obsidian table that had been carved from stone possessing lunar significance, her presence commanding attention through acknowledged expertise rather than inherited status, while serving strategic objectives that honored comprehensive evaluation of territorial needs over traditional limitation of advisory capability based on convenient assumptions about appropriate power distribution. The role that had emerged through heritage revelation, rather than conventional appointment, represented integration of capability that transcended anything normal assessment might suggest, while serving royal authority through systematic utilization of lunar magic that had been preserved through generations of protective concealment until circumstances required acknowledgement for community welfare. And territorial security. The southeastern border territories have reported complete elimination of rogue pack incursions. She presented to assembled council with professional satisfaction that reflected systematic implementation of defensive strategies that honored ancestral knowledge while serving territorial protection through enhanced magical surveillance, following installation of lunar ward networks that operate beyond conventional detection methods. Territorial stability has increased by 68%, she continued, with analysis that processed transformation through understanding of magical architecture that complemented physical security measures, while early warning capabilities have eliminated surprise attacks through comprehensive supernatural monitoring that honors both traditional patrol methods and enhanced mystical awareness. The comprehensive approach to territorial defense had established foundation for security that operated beyond simple military strength to encompass magical protection that honored ancient knowledge, while serving contemporary necessity for maintaining authority against challenges that might emerge from supernatural sources rather than conventional political opposition. Prince Kael, now Crown Prince following his father's acknowledgement of leadership capability, enhanced through alliance with lunar bloodline, reviewed strategic assessments with expression that mixed royal satisfaction with personal recognition of partnership that had exceeded any calculation based on initial confrontation, systematic evaluation that revealed relationship, whose integration had transformed territorial capability through acknowledged collaboration. The Lunar Council's response to integrated governance has exceeded all expectations, he observed with tone that carried authority strengthened rather than challenged by advisory relationship that honored expertise alongside royal decision-making responsibility, particularly regarding approaches that demonstrate effective leadership through comprehensive resource utilization, rather than systematic elimination that reduces available capability. Their collaboration reflected partnership that had emerged through recognition, rather than domination, professional relationship that honored individual expertise, while serving royal authority through strategic integration of capability that transcended traditional advisor limitations to encompass systematic contribution that affected territorial security and community welfare. Throughout Palace, where royal household operated according to principles that acknowledged heritage significance over circumstance, environment had been transformed through recognition that authentic authority served protection rather than entertainment, acknowledgement that effective governance required comprehensive utilization of available bloodlines rather than systematic elimination of competing capability. The Historical Archive Restoration Project has revealed documentation that was previously classified, observed Chief Historian Margaret Thornfield, with professional satisfaction that honored systematic preservation of knowledge that had been recovered through heritage acknowledgement, particularly regarding territorial development that was guided by lunar bloodlines before political consolidation, on eliminated official recognition of such contribution. The archival recovery had revealed methods that complemented modern approaches while serving strategic objectives that honored ancient wisdom alongside current necessity, demonstration that acknowledgement of eliminated bloodlines could serve territorial protection, rather than challenge established authority through unauthorized magical capability that threatened stability through competing claims. Training programs for magical integration among administrative personnel, continued Royal Guard Captain Elena Stormwind with military efficiency that honored practical implementation of enhanced governance protocols, have increased operational effectiveness while establishing systematic approach to supernatural utilization that serves comprehensive territorial management. The educational initiative had created foundation for governance enhancement that operated beyond traditional limitation, while serving acknowledgement that magical capability could complement conventional methods rather than replace established protocols that had proven effective for maintaining territorial authority and community safety through appropriate balance. Throughout territories where royal influence extended beyond ceremonial recognition to encompass practical protection of populations whose welfare depended on effective leadership, communities had learned about transformation that honored acknowledgement over elimination while maintaining appropriate standards for magical utilization that served protection rather than challenge to legitimate authority. Diplomatic response from allied kingdoms has been overwhelmingly positive, Royal Advisor Alara noted, with assessment that honored international recognition of policies that balanced magical enhancement with conventional governance, particularly regarding approaches that demonstrate effective integration of hereditary capability with established territorial management that serves security with challenging neighboring authority through unauthorized expansion. 7 territories have formally requested consultation about implementing similar bloodline integration programs. She continued with momentum that revealed broader implications of individual recognition that had inspired institutional changes, while their interests suggest that acknowledgement of hereditary capability serves strategic objectives more effectively than systematic elimination. The T reduces available resources for territorial protection. Mao. The diplomatic achievement indicated that honesty about bloodline survival served political objectives while providing foundation for alliance building that honored comprehensive capability over conventional limitation, international recognition, that validated approaches balancing acknowledgement with appropriate utilization, that served territorial protection without challenging established savoir. In private chambers where royal authority intersected with advisory expertise, through relationship that honored professional competence alongside personal recognition, Crown Prince Kale found himself reflecting on transformation that had challenged fundamental assumptions about confrontation and its relationship to strategic value that transcended initial calculation based on systematic cruelty. The harassment that brought truth to light, he observed with tone that mixed strategic satisfaction with personal acknowledgement of behavior that had created opportunity for recognition, despite systematic barriers designed to maintain comfortable assumptions about eliminated bloodlines. Was never really about entertainment, was it? No, she replied, with understanding that had developed through months when individual recognition had inspired broader transformation of governance philosophy. It was about acknowledgement, and whether hereditary capability could be integrated rather than eliminated, when circumstances required comprehensive assessment of available resources for territorial enhancement, rather than systematic reduction. Their conversation carried implications that extended beyond personal relationship to encompass fundamental questions about leadership and appropriate relationship between authority and capability, recognition and utilization, strategic necessity, and individual acknowledgement that honored both territorial security and community welfare through comprehensive resource management. Around them, palace that had been enhanced through magical integration while maintaining appropriate dignity served as demonstration that effective authority operated through comprehensive utilization rather than systematic elimination, acknowledgement rather than suppression, recognition rather than casual dismissal that might reduce available capability for territorial protection through comfort, able assumption about appropriate power distribution. The mathematics were revolutionary, Crown Prince Kale concluded with recognition, that transcended initial confrontation to encompass understanding about strategic value that operated beyond conventional calculation, though the variables exceeded any assessment based on surface evaluation, when heritage revelation transformed territorial security through acknowledged expertise rather than system. Attic elimination. In royal archives where their transformation would be documented for future reference, historians would record methods that had balanced acknowledgement with practical necessity, while learning that effective governance required comprehensive bloodline utilization, rather than systematic elimination, recognition rather than suppression that honored both capability and authority, through strategic integration. But in private moments when official responsibility allowed expression of personal recognition that had emerged through shared experience and mutual acknowledgement, they would remember Tavern, where systematic cruelty had been transformed through revelation that commanded strategic partnership, rather than entertaining dismissal, recognition that had emerged through confrontation rather than concealment. The Omega, whose heritage had been systematically suppressed, had discovered that official acknowledgement provided superior protection to careful concealment, while the prince who had cultivated systematic cruelty had learned that authentic authority required recognition rather than degradation, integration rather than elimination that honored comprehensive assessment over comfortable assumption out appropriate bloodline distribution. Their story had begun with systematic harassment disguised as entertainment, continued through revelation that challenged fundamental assumptions about eliminated bloodlines, and culminated in transformation that honored acknowledgement alongside authority while establishing precedent about governance that served both capability recognition and territorial welfare. The royal chambers where confrontation had been transformed into strategic partnership now served as foundation for comprehensive planning that honored magical capability while maintaining appropriate authority for territorial governance, demonstration that effective leadership required balance between recognition and utilization, acknowledgement and integration, heritage preservation and contempo. Rare necessity. Some cruelty that operated through systematic entertainment awakened responses that exceeded intended impact, while serving revelation of capability that commanded acknowledgement rather than casual dismissal, recognition that authentic authority operated beyond inherited privilege to encompass hereditary connection to forces that demanded integration rather than elimination through comfortable assumption about appropriate power distribution. The crown prince, who had chosen wrong target for entertainment, discovered that his greatest victory lay not in systematic cruelty, but in capability recognized, while the Omega, whose bloodline had been systematically concealed, learned that authentic authority sometimes emerged through confrontation rather than protection, acknowledgement rather than elimination, that honored strategic contribution, though Ver maintained limitation through protective concealment. Ancient magic that had been preserved through systematic suppression now served territorial enhancement through official recognition, while kingdom that had operated through systematic elimination of competing bloodlines had discovered that authentic capability exceeded conventional assessment to encompass hereditary potential that commanded strategic integration rather than casual dismissal throw. Entertaining cruelty that challenged basic human dignity. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.